Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be here at the closing night of the Teaneck International Film Festival and our final talkback for this season. I'm Sandee Brawarsky. I'm a journalist and the longtime book critic of the Jewish Week. I live in Teaneck and I really love our town's festival. I'm so happy to be here with the distinguished writer, Stephen Glantz, and with all of you after screening the powerful, uplifting, and really heartbreaking film Crescendo. Thank you to the Jewish Standard, a great weekly newspaper who are our sponsors for this evening. So here's the format. I'm going to briefly introduce Stephen, and then we'll have a discussion about the film. And then we'll have time for your questions. This is a reminder that our conversation is in real time, and we invite your questions. You can write to us through the chat box. So Stephen Glantz is an award-winning screenwriter and author. He lived in Los Angeles for 15 years and wrote for all the major studios and networks. For the past 10 years, he's been working for CC Film Kunst in Berlin, who are the producers of Crescendo. His German language films, including The Last Train and Wunderkinder, have won numerous awards around the world. Crescendo was on the short list of German films nominated for an Oscar. It's won awards in many international film festivals over these last months. Stephen is also the author of an award-winning Holocaust memoir written with survivor Clara Kramer called Clara's War. That book has been translated into 21 languages. He now teaches screenwriting at Emerson College and has also taught at Williams and Brandeis. One of the classes he teaches is on film and social justice, which, as you know, is the underlying theme of our film festival. And he joins us from his home in the Berkshires. So again, welcome, Stephen.
Hi, everybody. I can't see you, but I know you're all out there. I can feel you.
We feel your presence. So you're credited as the creator and the writer of the film. So I wonder, what was the inspiration for you to do this?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, I work for a German film company. And the man who founded it, Arthur Brauner, who just passed away at 102, produced 250 movies and 22 films about the Holocaust. And when I'd go to Germany, we'd eat a lot, drive around and listen to music in his car and eat a lot and talk about stories. And one day we were having lunch and he said, I thought of this idea like 15 years ago. But it might be relevant now because Daniel Barenboim had founded the West East Divan Orchestra, which is a real life orchestra about Palestinian and Arab and Israeli young people performing in an orchestra together. And that was, and from there we just started spinning stories. He has family in Israel and knows a lot of people there. So like often the bases of our stories are people that have been in his life. And he certainly knew a lot about what had happened on the Palestinian side during the War of Liberation. And that's sort of where the idea was generated.
So the film, it's so beautiful. It reminds me a little of the Sound of Music in those mountains. I wonder, where is it filmed?
It was filmed in the South Tyrol. And how we got there is, one of the amazing things about the film business is that most European films are financed, by film boards in parts of different countries and countries that want to support the film industry in their particular area. And their film board offered us some money, and originally the movie we were going to shoot it in Yalta, but we couldn't do that because of Putin invading the Crimea, and then we were going to do it in Potsdam, but then they offered money, and we said, well, we could set that part of the movie, where they went together to rehearse anywhere. So that's how we ended up in Italy.
And what about the Israel scenes? Where were they?
They were all filmed in East Jerusalem, or most of them.
Mm-hmm. And were these Some of the cast, I understand, are professional actors and the rest were musicians. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we wanted it to feel like a real orchestra. So we knew that we wanted musicians to play a lot of the music, the parts of they were musicians first, and a lot of them had never acted. But for the leads, we, had actors like Ron, Sabrina, Ayan, and Mehdi was Omar. And they practiced for months and months and months to learn their instruments. So it looked like they were actually playing. And one of the other films you mentioned, Wunderkinder, which is also about kids and music, there were three like very young teenagers who were all prodigies who played, and it just makes a difference when all the music is not dubbed.
Now, I know that you weren't there for the actual filming, but I wonder if the musicians, what their experience was like, and if they got along from the beginning, or if their relations were sort of reflected in what we see in the film.
It's also an interesting question. The first thing that happens when you get selected to be in a movie is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a movie, and you get excited, and then the next reaction is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a movie. And I don't know, sometimes we had the crazy idea a long time ago of having Palestinians play Israelis and Israelis play Palestinians, but then we kind of like, what were we smoking to be thinking that? So the cast was kind of a little bit nervous when they got together. And then as they started working, they were finding that, they just weren't saying lines, that the emotions of the characters really went deep. And we had them go through a lot of the prejudice reduction exercises that were depicted in the film. So it was a pretty intense set. I mean, on one occasion when we were shooting, they actually had to like work half days on when we were shooting the arguments and the confrontations. And on one occasion, it got so intense that a couple of people actually passed out. So those emotions, they're not acting, it's all real.
Well, and do you know if like after the film, if some of them have stayed in touch and
yeah, they've stayed some of them have stayed in touch. I mean, one of the things about filmmaking is it's like, people come from all over the world and they start working, and then the movie's over and they disperse. But I know that some of them have stayed in touch. Especially, it would have been better if COVID didn't happen, because as the film festival circuit is like a traveling circus, and the director, writers, producers, and some of the cast just travel from festival to festival, and it's fun. It's really fun to do.
Mm-hmm. So, what we see, like the backstories of Layla and Omar and their families, their homes, and we don't really see much about the Israelis and their stories. I wonder why is that?
It's a good question. I was surprised when I saw the film because the scenes had been written. And Ron, the violinist's family, like his backstory was that they were Russian emigres, and they came to Israel. They had great jobs. His older brother was killed in one of the bombings, which sort of explained his antipathy to anything Palestinian. So I don't know why they didn't get into the final film. I do know that Dror, the director, feels that in the West we know a lot more of the Israeli side of the equation, and I think he wanted us to see what it was like for everyday, for the Palestinians, because we still feel that anybody who's an Arab is a terrorist. I mean, there's still that underlying prejudice here. So I think part of it was to combat that. Dror is a very liberal left-wing Israeli, and so he's not too happy with the government. But I mean, I don't speak for him, but I mean, it's clear.
Mhm. And what sort of research did you do in writing?
Well, you know, I'm in and out of Israel a lot. I was like, especially like when I was writing this. So I hung out with, you know, Palestinian friends. And I have a lot of, not a lot, but some Palestinian friends here. You read a lot, you read all, you know, the stories of Israel and Palestine from the Arab side, which is very different than the Israeli side. And, you know, when I do something even contemporary, I like to do a lot of research, and the best thing to do is to talk to people and to get first person accounts, whether in the form of diaries or letters, like even memoirs. Even if I wrote one or helped write one, they're kind of suspect historically, because the way memory works is that, you know, they just get more solid in time, and you're having a memory of a memory rather than what actually happened.
Mhm. Yeah. What about Lila is such an interesting character, and she really develops through the film. And there's that wonderful scene in the beginning where she eats an onion, I guess, to get rid of the smell of the tear gas.
The tear gas, yeah.
Is that something real that musicians do?
Well, not just musicians, but everybody. I mean, it's a way, you know, that I guess it combats the tear gas.
Mhm, mhm. And
It's like
how did
I'm,
you feel about Lila? What was it like creating her?
well, Lila, she's a great character to write, because she's really caught in a vice. You know, she really wants just to play music. And the way this orchestra worked, I mean, it would just really open up the world for her. But, you know, there are parts of Palestinian society where it's not okay for women to, you know, to have that kind of freedom. But even, I mean, I know a lot of Palestinian women here, but there's that whole thing about settling down, marrying, have a family, you know, live a block away from your parents. And she had just this drive to be the best musician that she could possibly be. And how do you do that? And how do you, you know, weigh your desire for that against your responsibilities as a daughter, and also as a Palestinian person who, you know, would be consorting with the enemy.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. I like the way the relationship between Lila and Ron develops. One really feels that
Yeah,
strongly.
Dan Donsky and Sabrina, I mean, the two actors who played them, they were sensational. And both of them are going to have like huge careers, but like there was so much energy between them that I think it really elevated the performances of all the other actors and all the musicians, because when they're working, it's like, holy cow, you know, it's real. And when you have that kind of energy on the set, it just, you know, everybody else can feed off it. So, I mean, I was thrilled with her, and thrilled with Daniel's performances. I mean, Daniel is such a D head, you know, I mean, he really did that so well.
What about the character of the Maestro? Is he based? There have been a number of these Palestinian Israeli musical groups. I wonder if he's based on someone who's done this, or that was also a creation.
No, I mean, we didn't want to base him on Daniel Barenboim. I mean, we definitely wanted, like, as a matter of fact, when in the very, very first draft, the conductor that I wrote was from Chile, because I have a huge man crush on Gustavo Dudamel, and what he did in Venezuela. But then, as you know, we sort of moved on, we realized that, you know, we were going to need a big German star, and Peter was about as big as they get. I mean, he was in that movie Tony Erdmann, and he won all sorts of awards for that. And when we do these movies, it's hard to get away from the Holocaust. And it was not that wasn't, I think it was Dror's idea to give him that kind of backstory with, you know, the Nazi parents. After writing so many movies about the Nazis, you know, you kind of want to, I don't know, not that you get tired of it, but like if you're a German person and you're thinking and you're liberal and you're a humanist, you're still dealing with what happened 70 years ago. And, you know, it's this process of cleansing and expiation to sort of, for some people, to tell these stories or add elements of the stories to their work.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that his lesson of how Germans and Jews can learn to get along is something that could inform, Palestinians and Israelis in the way that Maestro suggests?
I mean, when I first went, like, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, you know, in a sort of middle Jewish class neighborhood. And if anybody, you know, any Jewish person bought a Mercedes, it was just like, you know, everybody stuck up their nose at them and, you know, what the hell are they trying to do? And the first time I went to Germany, you know, and I had all those prejudices too. My dad was the president of an Orthodox synagogue. And, you know, we had a lot of survivors or not, you know, a couple dozen. And when I was growing up, I had no idea why they were so gray. You know, I didn't know what had happened to them. I had no idea about the Holocaust. I think I just got lost. What was the original question that you just asked me?
I was asking if, you know, the Maestro says at some point that he feels that.
Oh, yeah. I think so. I mean, a lot of Jews are going back to Germany. And I think, I mean, it's a little crazy there now because the right wing is sort of, you know, coming back. But I love working in Germany. I love working with Germans. They've been so helpful to us, you know, and basically like every movie that's about the Holocaust, pretty much no matter where it's filmed, gets some money from Germany. And I mean, I think they've done a pretty good job of confronting their past in a way that we still haven't done here. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways. You know, my idea for the two-state solution is for all the Israelis and Palestinians who want to get along, live in one part of the country, and the people that don't want to get along, they can live in another part of the country, and then we'll just take it from there.
You need to be a statesman.
I think so.
That's a good idea. So I'm just starting to look at the comments and questions. The comments are really good. Someone just asked the question though about who were the terrorists and why were they targeting this group?
That's a question we've been trying to deal with for, you know, since we first started working on the movie. It's like, who is the bad guy? I mean, we couldn't have, you know, we're going to have right-wing Israelis. We're going to have really, you know, like terrorists on the Arab side. And then we didn't want anybody blowing up anything. We didn't want a Jew blowing up anything. We didn't want a Palestinian blowing up anything. And anytime that we wanted, you know, we went through some accidental stuff and that didn't work. And I like, anytime you get specific about who's a bad person in a movie, the movie becomes all about them. And then I think it was Elise who said, well, why the hell do we need to even know who it is? Because a lot of times people don't take credit for it, and we don't know, and we don't, and so, I mean, Elise Browner is just such a talented producer. So I think that was her idea, like just let it hang in the wind, and I think it works better.
And what if this other, like, there's a couple of sort of side themes, and then we have this kind of Romeo and Juliet story running through. What do you think the significance of that, or what was the significance to you in adding that?
Oh, well, the Romeo and Juliet thing was there from the very, very beginning. And Omar and Shira, they're really fun to write. They were, I don't know, there's just something about young kids being in love for the first time that's it's really defiant in a way, because the rest of the world is just blocked out, and their love for each other is the most important thing, and we wanted to have it just kind of like overwhelm everything else in the movie, and when those two were together, and in the Birnbaum orchestra, there are a lot of people got together, Israelis and Arabs and Palestinians, and a lot of them are living on the same street in Berlin now.
And but there's some like really lovely connections between the musical pieces that are played and the plot. Is that something that you also put together?
Well, okay, everybody who had a hand in the movie was trying to get their own favorite pieces in the movie. So I think these were pretty much all, Drawer's choices. It was Elise who came up with the idea of bolero, to use bolero at the end. And I think Pachelbel's canon was something, I think they wanted something familiar. Like, I'm a snob when it comes to music. So, I'd suggested kind of some other things.
So there are some people sort of coming back to this question of balance, and that the Palestinians are portrayed in a very sympathetic way. And someone is asking if, like, those scenes, at the checkpoints, with that the guard questioning her violin, if those are.
God, the checkpoint has been sort of another bone of contention in the creation of the movie, because when I was doing the research, I was just stunned at how complicated and horrible it was in the beginning when they first got together, the Birnbaum's orchestra, to get the Palestinians through the checkpoints. And there's a part of this script that wasn't shot, that was thankfully cut out, where there were like negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis governments about how best to handle getting the kids across the border. And I mean, in real life, there was like a 200 or 250 page document of protocols about how to handle every single situation. And in that, so in other drafts, there was more coming and going across, so it didn't seem so weighted. And I think the biggest problem for me was that the actress who played her was a little bit over the top in her performance. And I don't think they just caught it on the set, because I think if they saw it, they would have toned her down a little bit. I mean, it was.
You're talking about the soldier at the checkpoint?
Yeah, the female soldier. like her performance was kind of out of sync with the tone of the rest of the performances. And I mean, a lot of people have criticized that. And I mean, if she toned it down by like 20–25%, it wouldn't have come across as being so horrible. I mean, there are a lot of crossings and people just come and go, and it's not a big deal. I mean, we had the one, you know, I mean, sometimes you think you need to make the point, and maybe we didn't need to make the point that strongly.
For you, is there a particular moment or scene in the film that speaks most truly to you?
I love the audition sequence.
It's great. It's really great.
Yeah. I love when they went swimming, you know. I mean, I like the simple stuff. I like them learning to play together. I love, you know, the confrontations between Layla and Ron. I mean, there's no favorite. I mean, every time I see the movie, it's just like, oh my God, does Omar have to die again? It's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah, I watched it again last night. I was hoping he wasn't going to die.
Yeah.
Also, does you think the film has a crescendo?
You know what? I mean, that was the title, the first title of it. I don't know that. I mean, the crescendo is the moment before Omar is killed. That's a crescendo. And in that way, it's sort of the moment before the resolution of a piece of music. And I guess it's kind of dark, you know, in that way. I mean, it's not like a crescendo in Fantasia or some kind of movie like that, where you have an idea, like there's sort of like, you have this idea of a mythical crescendo with all, you know, this great harmony, but that's not often the case when it comes to music.
So someone is asking, saying that the Israeli musicians were so rude and entitled. Do you feel that's an accurate portrayal? It was very powerful.
You know, again, some of the Israeli musicians were entitled. I mean, one of the things, one of the hard things about being a writer is that a lot of the scenes that you really love kind of don't make it into the film. And there's some others, there's kind of this big like weekend party sequence that was pretty truthful in terms of some of these other groups that got a little crazy, where, you know, like all the barriers between the musicians would come down, and there's a lot of drinking, and then, you know, there's a lot of smoking weed, and then, you know, but when you're actually doing a movie, when you're portraying like Muslims who or kids who are getting bombed and high, it's really making a kind of political statement, even though that happens a lot, that, you know, we'd just be opening up ourselves for a lot of pain, because people were always looking for reasons not to make this movie. So we had to, you know, pull back on the Israeli and Palestinian friends who said, let's just go to LA and get stoned together, that kind of thing.
It must be frustrating to lose the scenes that you really like.
Yeah.
Someone is asking about whether it's been shown in Israel and what the reaction has been.
It's been shown in Israel. We were sort of, I'm not going to say this too loudly, but like all of our films, you know, usually win prize at the Jerusalem Film Festival. We weren't accepted with this film. I mean, I think now with the current sort of government, like I think a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the film would have been fine. But so I don't know if it's been in theaters or Israel. I mean, it'll get there sooner or later. So I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
So I guess one last question I want to ask you. Let's talk about the ending a little bit. I thought that scene in the airport is really beautiful and quite hopeful. And I wonder if you see it as hopeful, and that was always part of your vision for the film.
Yeah, I do. I mean, if there's no hope, I mean, what's the point of anything? I mean, I think there are people on both sides who are really hopeful. And I think the musicians themselves are hopeful. I mean, to make music is to be hopeful. I mean, it's intrinsic in the process, and to make music, I mean, it's a transcendent activity where you have to forget everything except the music. It's like what you walk into the room with. I mean, you leave everything that's negative at the door. And there were, I don't know, I mean, it's tough, but I think people want to live together. I mean, nobody wants to hate everybody for their entire life. That's not possible. It's awful to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the Maestro's line about you're trying to remember that your enemies don't have bad intentions.
Yeah. He was
good way to think.
He was such a good actor.
He was great. So I love that last scene, just the eye contact between Layla and Ron, and just the way they all got up and played was really beautiful. I've been hearing that music all day since watching the film again last night. One of
the great things about Dror and the way he directed the movie, I mean, a lot of the early drafts, they were so convoluted and complex with lots of different characters and just trying to do too much, but he just kept distilling and distilling and distilling and distilling until, it's just, the characters and the music. And I think he did just such a beautiful job with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really beautiful. So thank you, Stephen. And congratulations. It's a really beautiful film. And it's nice to end our festival on this a real message of hope. So thanks to you. Thanks to all of you for coming and joining us. Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And I want to introduce Jeremy Lentz, who's the executive director of the Teaneck International Film Festival right now. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello there. This is Jeremy. I wanted to come on tonight and to personally thank both Sandee and Stephen for a wonderful, wonderful talkback for our closing night film of Crescendo. You guys brought us home tonight, and we are grateful for that. I wanted to come on tonight live because you're probably all sick of seeing my white turtleneck for the last 2 weeks. So tonight you get a black turtleneck and you get me in real time. But I truly want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for making this virtual film festival a great success for Tiff. This has been a wonderful experience. We had no idea how this would kind of take flight, and it has been tremendous. We've been able to expand our reach nationally, internationally, and bring in people to learn about our festival and what we do here with our activism making change theme. And it is our hope that you all will continue to be a part of our Teaneck International Film Festival family and come back with us in 2021 for our 16th anniversary, and stay with us for all the other events that we have throughout the year, which I'll be talking about briefly momentarily. I do want to acknowledge our virtual Tiff production crew. Without them, this festival would not have happened whatsoever. These are the people that are on the back end of the OV, working to ensure that our films are playing successfully, working to coordinate our talkbacks and our Zoom rooms, and filtering your questions in to the audience. So I do want to acknowledge our production crew, Karen Sachs, Jason Koistra, David Bland back there in the Zoom room. Hats off to you guys. You pulled it off, and bravo, bravo, bravo. Also, you know, this, as we all know, has been one of the most challenging years that we have all lived through. Hopefully, you know, the light is shining at the end of the tunnel, and 2021 will be a better year for us all. I want to acknowledge and take a moment. This year, we didn't honor anyone in person, and we didn't have our, you know, wise older women or WOW honorees. So this year, I want to dedicate and honor this festival to those that we lost. And we lost 4 heavyweights to COVID in the spring. And I'd like to just have a moment of silence and acknowledge them. Our founder of the Puffin Foundation, which we are a project of, who provided us the initial seed money to start the film festival, Perry Rosenstein, who passed away, Janice Prischel, who served on the TIFF committee as a liaison for Teaneck Rotary and Temple Emeth, and was also a founding member of the Helping Hands Food Pantry right here in Teaneck. Walter Disler, who was a loyal TIFF volunteer and husband to the wife of our co-founder, Judy Disler, who is still, you know, I always call her the fuel, the engine behind TIFF, as well as Gladys Hoffler Thomas, who served as the arts chair for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Bergen-Passaic chapter, several years ago. So tonight we honor you, and we'd like to just take a moment of silence to thank you all for your contributions. Moving ahead, I want to inform the audience that now is your turn to participate and vote for the Audience Award favorites for this festival. We give 4 awards that the audience determines, and those are Best Feature, Best Documentary, Best Short, and Best of Fest. So at 10:30 approximately tonight, you're going to get an email in your inbox, and that will have the survey forms. We ask that you rate all the films that you have seen, and only rate the ones that you have seen. And we also ask that you only vote once. That will ensure that we don't have to hire Rudy Giuliani to litigate the vote count or to claim voter fraud at the Teaneck Film Festival. So you'll get that email coming in shortly. If for any reason you do not receive the email, you can go to the Teaneck Film Festival website, teaneckfilmfestival.org. The surveys are up there right on our homepage. You can't miss it. And you have until Tuesday, December 1st to cast your final vote. So make sure, do it tonight. It'll take you a few minutes to do. And lastly, I just want to close. As we've been saying throughout this festival, we are kicking off and returning in the winter and spring with our Wednesday night Indie Lens pop-up series. It's a documentary film series. There will be 1 film a month on selected Wednesdays from January through May. The first film kicks off on January 13th at 7 p.m. and the name of that film is 9 to 5. The Story of a Movement. So make sure you're signed up for our newsletter so that you stay in touch with us and get all the updates on the signups for that. Support us, donate. If you love what you saw here tonight, we are a nonprofit. We count on your donations. So we ask that you contribute and spread the message about TIFF far and wide. Have a happy, healthy, and safe Thanksgiving. Mask up, and hopefully the next time we see this, we'll be on much, much brighter territory. So thank you and good night.